is. And remember, you're welcome to participate in this conversation, and you can do that online. The hashtag is KTN Morning Express. The Twitter handle is at KTN Kenya, or you can tweet me directly, and that's at Michael G. Gitonga. As we carry on with the conversation, I'll see whether I can be reading through your comments. And a quick reintroduction of the panel that we have this morning for the way it is. To my extreme left, we are now joined by James Mamboleo, who is a political analyst. Thank you for joining us. And earlier on, we had already started with Ambrose Sweda, who is a lawyer. Now, let's start off with what has been happening. And recently, we have Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka saying that he was quoted out of context over his remarks on the abolishment of the presidential term limits. But was he? Let's listen into what he said, then we can weigh in.
Uhuru Kenyatta atasema after the new constitution tumeiunda. Na aseme ndugu Kalonzo, mimi nataka kuendelea mbele. Nitamwambia nitakusupport. I say, unanielewa? Lakini kama atasema Kalonzo, hii mzigo hii chukua, unganisha Kenya, mukate.
All right, so James Mamboleo, let me start with you. According to the Wiper leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, he says he's quoted out of context because what the debate has been was that he may be in support of an extended or constitutional amendment for the president, you know, to carry on with his term. What we heard him say there is that if it was amended and Uhuru apatiwe more time, he will be in support of Uhuru.
It's a very interesting question. Unfortunately, I have said before that the Wiper leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, needs to get his act together. You can't be flip-flopping on important questions like that.
Is it even possible for him to get his act together now, given that he already has a very consistent character in people's eyes?
That's the question, Michael. You know, you cannot imagine that you can get onto a public platform and announce something of the kind of proportion that he's announced, and then turn around and say, I was quoted out of context. You see, there are many things that we are discussing as a country right now, and one of them is the question whether we can hold a referendum to either expand the executive or tweak it in whatever form we want to. And we expect that leaders of the caliber of the Wiper leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, ought to be extremely clear as to really what position they're going to take, because many Kenyans depend on them for opinion shaping and direction. However, that said, I think we can understand the situation he's coming from. Probably he's testing the waters. He wanted to see what reaction the public would give him if he stated, for instance, that he would support an extension of Uhuru's term to beyond the two-term limit. And probably he also wanted to feel what his base especially would say if that were the case. But be that as it may, I think the important thing to take home from there is not so much the fact that he will support this way or the other in the question whether Uhuru Kenyatta's presidential term should be extended or not. The important thing we should get from there is this is Kalonzo, as usual, being neither here nor there at all times, and we should insist that we should get a little bit more clear direction from him on that matter.
All right, do you think he was misquoted? What else might he have been alluding to when he says that if a referendum came about and the presidential term was extended, I will support the president?
Misquoting means that you say something
that he did not say.
Then they add something extra. But he said, "Hii katiba tunaunda presidential term limit if President Uhuru says he would like to go on." So I don't think President would say he would like to go on as MCA Ichaweri Ward or Governor Kiambu. He would only like to go on as president. And that is why you amend the Constitution. So I expect my senior colleague, my former vice president, my senior colleague in the profession, and a man that I have known to have been all along been born again, to therefore I assume that I cannot assume that he smoked anything or drank anything. He must have been very sober. He should just be able to say, I'm sorry, that was not what I intended to communicate. I communicated to show that I would support the removal of term limits in this country for the president. That is not what I was saying. Maybe I was saying that if now we amend the constitution and we create other posts like the prime minister, like roving president, and then also we create other positions like handman for the president and so on, then I would be able to take this and the president would take this. That is the part. But coming to deny and blame others that I'm good, that is dishonest. Deputy Vice President Kalonzo, that dishonesty we are praying very hard should cease in this country. Whoever is imagining that they will extend the presidential term limit is saying he wants to undermine the very fundamentals of a presidential system. The term limits were introduced in this country.
For a reason.
For a reason, and violently. People lost their lives. People like Bativa lost their liberty, their health. People like Jaramogi died fighting, pushing the second President Moi to accept. He eventually accepted. They were introduced. President Moi did 10 years. Kibaki did 10 years. Now they are joking around. They want the president to start thinking, to start salivating. People will still die. They can gang together and impose it. We will still remove it later. And whatever it costs will be done. So, Deputy President, a former Vice President, please be careful when you talk. You are a leader that we value. You are a brilliant man. When you talk, don't get excited because now the President sent you here, sent you there, you walk into State House, you take tea there, then you think now you are on the table. You can jump around the way they jumped around during Moi's time. But the Vice President Kalonzo was with Moi when Kenyans were asking for multi-party. And he said it's impossible. Get out. Don't think about it. Eventually, when it came, he crossed over. Raila went and persuaded him and said, come, let's go. Let's go into the opposition. I know the desert we call opposition is difficult to survive in. It's only Raila who knows. And then Raila jumped and left them. Now they are coming to jump over. Let them stop that talk.
All right.
Dangerous talk.
And looking at Kalonzo Musyoka, Mamboleo, does he come out as a very strong leader in terms of his body language? I know for you to be a leader, especially of the caliber of president, one requires a certain amount of confidence that almost borders on arrogance. But when I listen to Kalonzo Musyoka, for instance, he did mention that hana shida kuwa mtu wa mkono of the president. Then secondly, now even here, he mentions and he says that if the president says Kalonzo and unite Kenya, so almost sounds like he's waiting for something to be given as opposed to, taking it. They say leadership is something that you take, it is not given. Do you get that feeling of confidence and leadership from him?
Michael, if you walk down history lane, you'll find that just before the 2002 election, in the 90s, Kalonzo Musyoka was probably one among 4 top ministers in Moi's government who were touted as presidential material for a very long time. And that probably got into their heads. So that when Moi did a surprise and told them, friends, it is not about friendship. This thing is about finding a man, however young it is, and assisting him with everything that you require to put in his place for purposes of him ascending to the presidency. And that is how he sprang. The surprise that is the 4th president of the Republic of Kenya, now Uhuru Kenyatta. You asked a very important question. Does Kalonzo Musyoka look like the kind of fellow who can ascend to the presidency of this country? If you take the history of this country and how various past presidents have ascended into the presidency, then the answer will be a big no. Why? Because, first and foremost, he doesn't seem to command a serious base, with which he can come to the national table and then have a conversation with his peers, with the possibility of probably asking one or 2 of them to support him in a serious bid for the presidency. Just the other day you saw in his own backyard of Kambani, the governors there are saying, we are tired of this kind of leadership. We need someone with a little bit more spine, someone who can stand on a national platform and he will be respected by other people across the country. But when you listen to Kalonzo speaking, I think finally he has accepted that probably he may not become president or he cannot not ascend to the office of the presidency. And so he has decided, let him play at whatever level he can. Okay, if it be
almost a survival game.
Almost a survival game. If Uhuru decides to make him a roving ambassador into Arusha or Dar es Salaam or whatever place it is, he will be willing to take it, which for me is a very important thing, because then we have now, that puts us on a very clear path as to really who the players in future presidential elections are going to be. And I can see the Kalonzo isn't going to be one of them.
Yeah. Whether do you feel that he commands that power and confidence of a presidential material, given that he's already facing challenges at home, although challenges are part of, you know, what makes a leader. So that really cannot be used to define as to whether he can be or not be president.
Personally, I think Kalonzo has the presidential material. He can make a very good president. After all, being president is not rocket science, if you ask me. We have seen presidents all over Africa who function. What Honorable Kalonzo seems to miss is tact, and then he misses the tact because he has an elephant ego. He could have easily become Raila's vice president in 2007. They would have defeated Kibaki with 1 million votes. By now, he would be arranging to be president. But then the ego left him out. Ego, nothing else. Ego. Moved out, said people like Raila are hated, blah, 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 blah. By the time he woke up, he was so much down. Then he started into blunders. Blunders that he's doing even now. While he was still away, Honorable Raila walked over to Uhuru and said, we are together. He found himself again out. Then blunder. He goes down and said, now I can be your messenger. I can be all these things. But otherwise, as a presidential material, he can make a very refined, very honorable president. If he removed ego, and then I also suspect, this is my suspicion, that he has, there are some people he would really show. There are people who think they don't respect him. And if he was to be president, he would deal with them. He is not the type of man who will forget the past and say, now I'm president. We are moving forward. There are people who say, Kitonga, that one when he was at KTN, he used to say, I'm useless. Go and show them. Is that, I suspect. I'm not saying he is. So, but as a presidential material, he is. All he needs to do is to be tactful. Anybody who is brilliant would, having gone that far with Honorable Raila, the day he said handshake, if I was in the issue, I would have also announced, I'm in the handshake. In fact, what Jakoma said is what we have been talking about.
All along.
But jumping up and denying, then later on they now say, oh, Baba beat me again, I'm around, make me what you want. Now, that again is humiliating. It's our grandfather.
That tact is what is lacking in terms of getting him to that seat of presidency, by virtue of the fact that politics is a very dirty game, as they have called it, but it's also one full of tact and looking for, you know, loopholes that you can take. He seems to always miss that particular loophole.
I think there I would blame President Moi. I would blame others. Why? He was picked up the way you'd prick your child and grow him until he's big head. But you have not. I say this because I saw the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. He took my Governor Nyong'o, he took Mheshimiwa Rengo, he took several people and allowed them to grow in lowland where his word was law. He says, Nyong'o's mind works like a computer. I need him, and we vote him. Orengo is the tactician, he's voted. But what about his own son? He could have taken him to Kisumu. He threw him in the deep end in Nairobi, where it was not guaranteed he would win. He had to work his ways out, and he would criticize him. I remember when we went for Ford Kenya, whatever, he refused that Raila would not be elected to any party post. Some of us are the ones who made noise and said, Jaramogi, there will be no party here unless Guambo is given a position.
Given something.
Now, looking back 20-something years, I see that he was making his son strong. He was tempting him. He was taking him through fire And from far, he's so strong that he shook Moi, he can shake Uhuru. These other guys cannot shake anybody. So they were destroyed at the beginning.
All right, and that is the former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka. But let's come to the current Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto, who seems to be softening his stand regarding the much talked about referendum to amend the Constitution after he proposed the creation of recognition of official opposition in Parliament. Speaking in Chatham House, London, on Friday evening, Ruto said it wasn't proper that a leader garnering second highest number of votes had no formal constitutional role, a situation which undermines the executive accountability.
National government should be reconfigured to comprise the national executive headed by the president and the official opposition headed by the leader of the party or coalition of parties whose presidential candidate wins the second highest votes. That is good for accountability. And secondly, it removes or mitigates the winner-take-all perception. The leader of the party which becomes second becomes the leader of the opposition, and with his or her running mate automatically becomes members of parliament and assume the leadership of official opposition. This formula should apply at the county level as well.
All right, and that's the Deputy President speaking in London. Let me start with you, James Mamboleo. There are some political pundits who feel that there is a change of tune in what the Deputy President had to say. He has so far been very opposed to any change to the Constitution currently, especially with an expanded executive, and this seems to be a change of tune. Your thoughts on that?
I do not think that it's a change of tune. As far as I'm concerned, you see, I have not, in my recollection, heard the Deputy President saying that he was wholesomely opposed to a referendum. I think what I've heard him say many times, and his supporters, is that we do not as yet know exactly what the referendum is going to be about. And I see that statement as an opportunity for him to express himself on what he thinks would be the way to go if we attempted to change the Constitution from the current scenario. We have a presidentialist system in which after a president has been elected, the person who comes second, and in this case that person can have won almost half the country, goes home without nothing. Believe me, if the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga wasn't such a strong political personality, by now he would already be forgotten. So if you go and do a simple comparison with the presidentialist system of the United States, where we borrowed this from, you'll find that most of those people who run for president are probably serving senators, or they are in some position in the United States. And you know, there, you don't have to resign your position and go run for the presidency. That's why John McCain continued, for instance, being a senator in the US Senate for a long time. So this experiment of democracy in which the winner takes it all and the loser goes home has been a huge problem in this country. You can see right from 2007, or even just after the reintroduction of multi-party, a huge section of the population feels so disenfranchised, leading to a number of very hazardous socio-economic problems in the country. So what we keep saying is, can we tweak this constitution to find a balance in which that section of the country which feels lost in the entire election process can actually find some formal process somewhere. And so I think the Deputy President is putting his voice on this particular process, and he's saying what many of us have been saying all along. Let us have a scenario in which the official opposition has some formal structures from which it can operate. So if, for instance, Raila Odinga today was in parliament, then he would feel like he has a place where he can actually speak, instead of running around in an haphazard manner in which you are not so sure what position you hold. So the leader of the official opposition goes to parliament and organizes the opposition from parliament. There is a shadow opposition with various people from parliament. That is something that some of us would suggest. However, as we do that, okay, let's also know that the important reason why a lot of people are not happy about elections is the process of election itself. So that even if that is the ultimate goal, let us make sure the process of democracy works fine. Let us make sure whoever is in charge of conducting elections conducts them in such a way that we are not left asking questions whether those ones who have won actually won, and those who lost actually lost.
Whether your thoughts on this?
I think, remember the words of the deputy president. Wale wameshindwa, please allow us to work. Play your role. If there is any man Kenyans should watch whenever he talks, is the deputy president. Watch what he says because it matches what he does. One, if you look at the MPs that he helped to win, where he controls, parts of the Rift Valley controls, they are very young people, very young, 20-something, 30-something. He himself looks at Raila, he looks at Kibaki. He knows he has 3 attempts at the presidency. So his budget is 30 years. Whether President Uhuru supports him now, he's with him, he is there, he seems to be saying, I will run for the presidency and I will grow into the presidency. So he has started with the MCA, with the MPs, with the senators, all young, younger than him. In other words, they will grow with him. So what he's simply trying to say is for now you can shout me out of the presidency. I have no problem. I can even compromise, but nobody will prevent me from running. President Uhuru and Honorable Raila and everybody else can gang up against him and even defeat him. But he shall have collected a mass of votes, and all he needs is to remain relevant. What do you need to remain relevant? Money. And he is amassing it every day, every night. What else do you need? Good health. You can see the way he's very slim. Instead of being fat as president, he as a vice president, deputy president, he is taking good. What do you need? Number 3, relevance. He's amassing troops. And then he will wait. Because
for him, it's strategy.
This is basic strategy. He said, in fact, if I don't become president, because he knows if he does become president, he will get the second numbers out. He says, put me into parliament, I'll continue with my troops. And then he will wait for Raila 10 years. If Raila was the president, he will wait for him. You shall have forgotten about corruption, all this taka we're talking about will be forgotten. He will wait 20 years.
The question then remains, if your theory is anything to go by, at what point does Wanjiku come in, and is that good for the country?
I have always said here that Wanjiku is like a bag of potatoes. You carry on the back, yes, you carry on the back, you put it down when it is necessary, you carry it. For all of them, the president, the deputy president, Honorable Raila Odinga, and all this. Now that they are talking, are they worried about Wanjiku? They are not.
Mamboleo, do you agree that Wanjiku here by politicians is more or less a tool for elections? Used when needed, and once their job is done, let's wait for another 5 years.
I tend to disagree a bit with my senior on what is just said about the question of the leader of the opposition operating from the formal structures of parliament. You see, even strong candidates like William Ruto would not prefer a scenario if they lost election in which they will go completely out there in the oblivion. They would still prefer to probably work from a more formalized structure like the precincts of parliament. And so in that strategy that he mentions, in that tactfulness that William Samoei Ruto is associated with, he has already also seen that probably one of the compromises that he could actually make in the question of changing the constitution is to have us move into a situation in which if you became a leader of the opposition, then you operate from some formal place, okay? So I do not think that my friend Weda is disagreeing with us on that particular question, because what it means is that if William Ruto then doesn't become president, then he operates from parliament. But then I quickly agree with my brother that, you see, Wanjiku has never been the reason why the political landscape moves this way or that way. Wanjiku is that ultimate pawn in the game that will be used for purposes of taking that particular direction that politicians want to take. Believe me, you now, today, in this country, if Raila Odinga sat down with Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto and agreed that this is the direction this country will go, believe me, you, it doesn't matter how much noise the so-called Wanjiku would make. There is absolutely no change that would come other than the change these leaders are directed. So what are we saying? That the politics that you see out there in the rallies has already been designed in the boardroom, where my friend Weda and other people sit. And they say that you go to your people and tell them like this, or create a situation in which people have to start thinking like this. And that is exactly what will happen at the end of the day. What we hope is that as these leaders are cooking constitutional changes or whatever other changes, is that they will be driven by common sense and some form of goodwill, some patriotism for their country, so that they do not lead the country astray. And Michael, you must agree sometimes that, you know, Wanjiku might not necessarily be the most informed person on matters constitution. And so in some cases, they might not necessarily even know what is best for them. So the important thing is, from time to time, leaders may have to do certain things which Wanjiku probably does not even understand. But we hope that as they do that, and I know, at least I can see, I do not think that Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, or the Deputy President William Ruto are keen on taking this country astray. They might have their own burning political ambitions, but I do not see any of them who is desirous of bringing the house down.
Let me just add that the reason why I don't have a voice and you don't have is because you don't have enough Wanjiku. The day you have enough Wanjiku that you can swing around, tell them today we are going to block the road, today we are going to die for this country, and they come out and they are killed for you. You have a voice and you matter, whether you are in the house or you are out. Before the run-up to elections, everybody was like dying for the former Prime Minister. We were dying for him. They were willing to, and people died. The day he said, now we have a handshake, keep quiet. If Wanjiku was to come up and say, what about those who died? He would be told, keep quiet. You don't know where the country is going. That's why I say they are a bag of potatoes. Once they have accepted themselves, they have put themselves into your bag, then you carry them behind. That's why now some people like Wetangula are not strong enough, because the Wanjiku in their bag is lighter.
Heavy enough. He's not heavy enough. Yeah. All right, we'll need to wind up. James Mambole, I'll start with you. And the question here being, what should Wanjiku look out for, given that, as you say, politicians will sit in a boardroom and maybe craft what they feel will work for them first, then, of course, use Wanjiku as a pawn?
Ultimately, when the boardroom game has been finished, it is going to be mooted out here to Wanjiku to examine. And we expect people of goodwill, publicly spirited individuals to come out and say, yes, you're proposing this, but the best way it can work is this. This is where we expect professionals to come out and say, this experiment has been done down south in South Africa. This one has been done in Ethiopia. We have a presidential system, for instance, in the United States. And look, this is how it's working. This is how the situation looks in the Philippines. Look at the parliamentary democracy in the UK, and so on and so forth. And then put all that experience in the process of creating a constitution which doesn't become a huge problem in the development of this nation. Because sometimes somebody can create a system which is going to be self-defeating. So these politicians finally are going to ask professionals to assist them in crafting a constitution that makes sense, that accommodates what they're looking to accommodate, but which at the end of the day makes sense. And most importantly, that is going to be the place where Wanjiku can also have a say in saying, look, you know, as you do those changes, can you also change for us something small here and there that touches on Wanjiku?
All right, your closing comments.
All I can say is that tinkering with the Constitution to remove the presidential term is a no-go zone. And Kenyans should tell the leaders who are trying to introduce the idea through the power or to suggestion to stop doing that. It is the very foundation of a presidential system. You tinker with it, we will go the Uganda way, we will go the Rwanda way, and Kenya is different from those countries. Therefore, even leaders like my senior colleague, Mheshimiwa Kalonzo, please don't don't go there.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. That is Ambrose Weda and James Mamboleo, who are both lawyers and also well-versed in matters politics. That's the way it is. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's now 28 minutes to 8, and right here on Morning Express, we're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. Morning Express continues after the break.